Welcome to the Million Dollar Blueprint with Karen Pudetti, where we can talk about the honest truth about either starting a business or growing your business to the $1 million mark. I will give you a roadmap that provides you with the ideal client or buyer, financial wisdom, marketing, branding, leadership, and so much more. Thank you for joining the Million Dollar Blueprint. I hope you enjoy the episode. Welcome to the Million Dollar Blueprint with Karen Pudetti. I'm very excited today. I have somebody on, and he has led he started his career one down one direction and then changed it probably a couple of times actually. And it's always kind of cool to hear about your family members. I have my dad here. Most people call him Wayne Jones. Again, I call him Dad. And I just want to let everybody know who's out there that he used to say I was his favorite older daughter because I have two younger sisters. So he used to say that to each of us, depending on where we fell in the 1, 2, and 3. So anyways, welcome, Dad. Thanks so much for being on here with me today. I greatly appreciate taking your time and kind of you doing this with me.
It's a pleasure, Carrie. Anytime I can spend time with one of my three great daughters, especially my favorite oldest daughter, yeah,
Yes.
it's always a pleasure. And by the way, you're Karen Pudetti to everybody but me. You're Carrie to me. So I'm talking when I say Carrie, everybody should know that's you.
Yes, that's been my nickname I've been given since, I don't know, probably a tiny, tiny little girl.
Yeah.
So I wanted to talk to you today because you've had a very, I think, really exciting career. You've done several different things. I remember Coral, who's my stepmother, my father's wife, telling me some really cool things that happened during your career. She was bragging and showing off how great you were, and we'd ask you about it. You go, oh, no, I was just in Japan. Yeah, we've got a meeting. So it was very cool to hear her tell stories about your career and things of that nature growing up. So I want to ask you, what was your first professional job? I mean, you went to college, and did you go to college for what you really wanted to do?
Wow, that's a loaded question because let's start with my first professional job. I went to school to be a chemical engineer. I graduated from the University of Massachusetts as a chemical engineer, and then started with Eastman Kodak Company. You know, it's funny. You bring me back to my first day on the job. I graduated from college thinking I knew everything. You know, here I had this degree. And I remember showing up for work and realized I didn't know much of anything. I think that's probably how we all start our career. I was working in a department that made complicated photographic chemicals for the film and paper business, and the equipment was very complicated, so I had a lot to learn. And had that imposter syndrome that we probably all have. And I can remember my first assignment was to solve a problem with one of the manufacturing processes. So of course I felt overwhelmed. But I have to say it was a proud moment when I solved my first assignment, and it was a big relief. And and that kind of shaped how I moved forward in my career. The approach I took. No matter how tough the job seems, you just start, you make your plan, you follow through, and good things are good things will happen. So that's how I launched my career.
That's very cool. Now I know you went back to school and I think Diane and I was probably 5 and she was probably 4, and you got your MBA degree. And I remember not having a clue why we were there, but being real small, we had matching little outfits and we looked really cute. And we were walking around this place that now I know is a campus. And so, what made you decide to go back to school and get your MBA?
Yeah, that was a decision I didn't take lightly because at the time I had three small kids. That was, let's see, you must have been about 5 when I started, and probably nine or so when I graduated, because I did that for 5 years at night, and with three little kids at home and trying to fit in a few golf games or other sports for fun. It was really over the top, and But I realized that if I wanted to grow, I needed more perspective on the business. I had the technical part good, but I wanted to know more about finance, marketing in the business. And so that MBA gave me a whole new way of thinking about the business and strategy. And so 5 long years at night, but it was well worth it.
So no regrets?
No regrets. I thought that was going through it. I don't know if I'd ever want to do it again, but the the outcome of it and the benefit it gave me was really important.
I don't think I realized it took you 5 whole years. That's quite a,
5 years of nights. Yeah, yeah,
that's, no offense, that just sucks. All right.
yeah.
Well, at
It was
least you
long.
you did it. That's great and got that and stuff. So now tell me about your whole professional career. I mean, you started as an electrical engineer, got your MBA, and then where did you kind of go from there? What was your next step?
Hmm. Well, my career took me through some really incredible roles. Um, as I said, I started in the chemicals business, and I got some promotions. I moved from position to position, learning a lot at every step along the way. That was a great part about working for Eastman Kodak. Um, Worked with different parts of the company. Had a lot of fun things like along the way, and part of my development, they gave me a training assignment um, to support the Kodak's global leader of operations. Now he was in charge of all the manufacturing plants worldwide in several countries, France, England, Australia, Canada, U.S. of course, and I got to travel with him. But my job was to support him and to process anything that came his way. So he'd get all these reports and mail and things to approve, and I'd have to process them all, and then I'd organize them and present them to me. And then he put me on the spot and say, "Okay, Wayne, should I sign this approval for the new building in France?" So I really felt on the spot. So I had to do a lot of homework. Always had to be prepared. Had some fun times. I remember one time I had some urgent things that he had to process, but he was on his way out the door. He had to travel. I think he was going to Japan. Um, he didn't want to be late for the corporate jet was going to take him down to over to California, and so I had all this stuff that I wanted him to approve, and we weren't finished. So he said, "Well, get in the limo, come to the airport with me." So we're in the limo trying to finish up. We still weren't finished. So he says, "Well, get on the plane." So I jump on the corporate plane to get him to sign some things. Well, we took off. Before we knew it, I was in California, and I did have everything signed and approved. But there I was with my pile of stuff, and had to find my way back to Rochester. So that was always exciting. Uh, but when I was done with that, he gave me a really interesting assignment. He asked me to spearhead a global chemicals program to put statistical process control in place for all of our purchased chemicals so that what we knew when we were getting these chemicals, they were all in the perfect quality that we needed and weren't going to interrupt production of film and paper down the line. So that was a huge experience, but it was a global responsibility, a great learning experience. Um, so that was my professional career up to that, and I was assigned as a division manager for one of the subsidiaries, and and that was kind of a turning point in my career too, because I was getting into more leadership, and I discovered there was another piece of my education that was missing at that time. I had the technical piece okay, and then the business pieces were in place, but there was something more about leadership that I wanted to know, and I realized it had to do with human behavior and what makes people tick, how do you influence people, how do you get them inspired and all that kind of stuff. So you mentioned my wife Coral. She was into coaching. She said, why don't you take up coaching? That's a lot about understanding people, just listening to people, talking to people, building trust, building relationships. So I said, yeah, that sounds like the piece I'm missing. So that's that's when I kind of shifted my career to doing some more coaching, and it actually helped me be a lot better leader. I was assigned to corporate role in Massachusetts with a manufacturing plant. That plant needed to be turned around. It needed a lot of leadership, not just the technical and the business, but also the leadership. So it really served me well. And um, and that's kind of where I spent the end of my Kodak career, was turning that company around, and we were very successful. So that was a proud time in my career.
I do remember that. I think you were there, and I moved to Boston to try living down there. I always wanted to go live in a big city, and New York City didn't really appeal to me. And I moved to Boston for like over a year.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember driving through all that traffic just to come and see you in your apartment.
Yeah. Good old Boston traffic. Gotta love that.
Oh, man.
And can I tell everyone that's when you kind of went from a Bills fan to a Patriots fan? That's
Yeah,
when
it's
he
funny. I
left
was
the
a
Bills.
diehard Bills fan, and my brother called me one day. He lived in the Boston area too, and he said, "Hey, Wayne, you want to go to a New England Patriots game?" And I said, "Why? Why would I do that for?" Well, he said, my dad had never been to a professional football game, and he was a real fan of football. And I remember he was a big Giants fan in the early days. So he said, "Let's take Dad." So I did. So the three of us went, took Dad, and my dad. I can remember sitting there. He was looking on the field, saying, "Wow, this is really professional." It was really fun to see him in his eyes the first time. So we ended up going again. Pretty soon, we bought seasons tickets, and it wasn't, and they were losing every game at that point. But not too many years later, the Tom Brady and Bill Belichick era hit, and they won championships, and it was just a lot of fun being there. With my dad passed away along the way, but it was a great bonding for my brother and I and our families, and so I remember that part of our lives, family,
Yes,
as fondly. Yeah,
yes. And then every time you tell us about the Patriots, we'd all be rolling our eyes on, "Ugh, we
I
don't like
know.
the Patriots. We like the Bills."
I
So, but
know. I wasn't popular when I'd come to Rochester and visit family, and I couldn't talk about the Patriots.
no, that was not the topic any of us wanted to discuss with you at that point in time.
You're absolutely right.
So tell me, what were the
That's
things?
about political savvy, by the way, something you learn in corporate America. You have to have a little political savvy, knowing who to say what to and that kind of thing.
Yeah, after a while, you couldn't even mention Pats or anything because we were just so annoyed that they kept beating the Bills terribly every time.
I know it would hurt me to see that, because oh God, I got to go to Rochester. Wish we didn't beat the Bills.
Yeah. So my next question for you is, what did you really enjoy about corporate America?
There are a lot of good things, and pros and cons. As I said, I had a great career and had a lot of opportunities. Um, Sometimes the companies can get too big. Kodak was big, and you can get lost in it. So I would say you really have to pay attention to that, and have to be proactive about your own career. Don't let yourself get lost. Pay attention to that. But the biggest thing for me is when you enter into a corporation, or really any job, you need to think about culture, because culture is different in every corporation. And I was fortunate to work at Kodak, where it had a great culture. They were focused on business and getting bottom line results, but their priorities were right. They paid attention to people, making sure their employees were taken care of. I mean, we had good benefits, good pay, but also the training and the support that we got. They really made employees and customers a main focus, not just, cutting costs and all those things. It's really important to be aligned with culture. And, I coach a lot of clients now, and I'm always asking about their personality, their style, and their culture. And I can remember one senior financial analyst, big firm in Boston, was working there, and the firm was kind of shifting. They were always about supporting their clients, but they now realized they wanted to make a bottom line, so their priority was changing a little bit. And my client was all about the customers, all about the clients, serving them. So the culture was moving, and he wasn't. He didn't like that. So we talked about how we would handle that. One way is just to, hey, accept that. He wasn't ready to do that, so he actually left the company, And in fact, now he's the president of a bank in Chicago, and they're known for their personality, if you will, their brand around being all about serving the client. So you can see where he turned his value system, if you will, into shifting the culture of a bank that's very successful. But he found he found his way. There's another client I had who was a real entrepreneur. He would make it was a global logistics or supply chain operation, and he was very entrepreneurial. But he'd come up with a great idea, and this company was all about bottom line and decimal points and financial, and they'd make him take his innovative idea to the financial organization where their culture was not about creativity, innovation. They were about, the decimal points and the margins and would just destroy his creativity. So he was another guy who left, went to a competitor, made the competitor millions of dollars with his ideas because they were very innovative and they're now the number one in that business. So I've seen a couple of places where a misfit for culture is really the most important thing, and it can stifle you. These two would have been stifled, but it turned out they recognized this, moved to a more comfortable culture, and became very successful. So I'd say that's the biggest thing. Corporate America is great, but make sure the culture is right for you.
Yeah. I think many people ignore that and end up hating their jobs or just being so disengaged and unhappy. It's
That's exactly
and
right.
you spend so many hours at work, as you know. So it's a huge part, and I see it a lot today, even in my industry. They're like, "This is definitely not your true passion. So why are you still here?" So
That's
that's
exactly
very
right.
cool. So, that's very cool. Do you think were you ever in that position that you were in a job that probably wasn't the best for you, or no? Or did you just look at it as a stepping stone?
I think there are a few places along the way, um, like early in my engineering career, I recognized that I started working with a group of people that were all about the deep chemistry, researching the deep chemistry of things. And that wasn't really my interest. And it was, there are cultures of big companies, but even within the company, there are different cultures. And I realized that wasn't the culture that was helping me to thrive. And I was able to shift to another role that was much more aligned with what I needed. But fortunately, I was not too astute, organization astute in those days, but enough to recognize that this wasn't a place where I was going to thrive. And I was able to shift to another opportunity that came along. So I would encourage everybody to pay attention to that. Am I really feel like I'm succeeding? Is this an environment for me to thrive in? Uh, do I get up in the morning? I can't wait to get to work. Or is this, oh no, it's Monday morning? I mean, those are the signals that say something not quite right. Let me look for something a little better.
That's very true. Um, I think that's kind of why I left the corporate world of corporate accounting, as it just wasn't suiting me. I didn't enjoy it. I didn't love it. I just felt that there had to be a hell of a lot more out there in the world than this. So I get
And you
that.
found it. And you found it.
Yeah.
So you're one of those success stories, Carrie.
Well, yeah, I still got some stuff to do first, though. I still got some more stuff. So, was
We
there
all
any?
do.
What was that?
We all do.
Yeah. So, was there anything else you can think of that from the corporate America you didn't like? Or let me ask you this: were you ever stifled because you do have such an entrepreneurial, what is the word, existence about you and who you are and what you do? Did you ever feel like it was stifled there, or were you in enough positions where you were feel like you were utilizing those kind of things?
I really did. I really felt like it suited me. The the company was big enough that I had there were plenty of opportunities out there as long as I had the opportunities and I helped guide it myself. The culture was good for me. Benefits were great. Had a lot of big challenges and a lot of big resources. I mean, when I ran that chemicals company, I had the authority to spend millions of dollars at different times to get what we needed. Great people to work with, and even when there are business risks, you always have the big company to support you. So things were good, and that was a Kodak was a big company. It's like moving into a big city. Lots of things, lots of things you can do, different types of work. So I really did like that. I really benefited from the big corporate scene. Not everyone will. You have to find your own place.
Yeah, that is true. That is very, very true. So I do remember you were announced to me, Diane Linda, that you were going to retire from Kodak, and we had a big retirement dinner for you for retiring. And really, you retired from Kodak, but you just kept working doing something else, and still haven't, stopped working at all. So what made you get into consulting, and what was your thought process on doing that?
So a couple of points there. One is I encourage my clients not to think about retirement. I've had clients that call and say, I'm about to retire. Can you coach me on what to do next? And I like to think of that in a different way. Our life is a long runway, and along the way, we'll work at this company or that company or change careers, but they're just stops along the way. And my work at Kodak was a stop along the way, but only to move on, continue on my journey. So the word retirement, I think, sometimes stifles us like there's a big ending of something. And I like to think of life as more a continuation. And what transpired for me, Carrie, is that when I was working as a leader, that last 15 years when I ran that company, um, I took up coaching, as I said, so I could be a better leader. And we actually created what people said was a coaching culture because I taught my leaders how to coach. We coached everybody. We're always giving feedback and encouraging people how to do better. Uh, and it was noticed by everyone in the company. I had been asked the last few years I was working there, I'd been asked from corporate headquarters to come to back to corporate headquarters in Rochester 1 week every month and teach groups of leaders how to coach people. So I'd travel back once a month and I would teach a 2 day workshop to about 20 leaders at a time. I put a few hundred leaders through that program. And they were all really excited about the whole idea of coaching. And I was then asked to coach some of the business teams in other parts of the company. I began coaching some of the individual corporate leaders. One was interestingly, remember the assignment I had to be an assistant to the Kodak's global leader of operations. Well, now there was a new corporate global leader of operations, and he asked me to come in and coach him personally. So now I was kind of doing some of the same thing, but as the coach, not the assistant. So I didn't have to jump on any planes with him or anything like that. But uh, those experiences helped me to rethink what I was doing. People started calling me the coach, and I kind of internalized that yeah, I guess I am a coach. And it helped me find my real passion. I realized that that's what I love to do, and I could see I was making an impact. So I even got some invitations to coach outside of the company, and didn't have to do much thinking as to what I wanted to do next. It was kind of almost my calling, I guess, and that was the next chapter for me. So I wanted to take all my experiences and my training and help other leaders who are going through the same challenges I've gone through. Just help them be more successful. And so now I had the three areas, the technical, the business, and the coaching. And I felt I could make a contribution. So it was, again, I didn't see it as a closure or retirement. I saw it as a continuation of just who I am. I had one stop at the work, doing that work for Kodak. I was on to my next stop. And I encourage everybody to think about life and careers in that way.
I think that's huge. I think I've never had someone actually say it like that. It's kind of like you work or you hear people say retire. So I've never really heard that said, like I said. And it's funny because, I'm getting to the age where people start talking about retirement. I'm like, retirement? What the hell are you going to do? And I just don't ever see me like not working. I would drive myself and everybody else around me pretty crazy, I can imagine. So I just don't see the time where I won't work, but I often think about what is my next step. And I've been kind of going through that for the last, I don't know, 6 months. I've thought about it over last year, but really trying to think, what is my next step? What else, you know, I'm ready to try or do something else. Not sure what that is exactly yet, but it's in
Well,
my
you you may be doing it. You may be doing it. One of the things that I like to think of life as just a long adventure. It's funny when you kids were little, we used to do these treasure hunts where you'd find a clue and it'd tell you where the next clue is, and you go to that clue and it'd tell you where the next clue is. We used to do that, for Easter baskets or just to have fun. I like to think of life that way. You know, when I graduated from high school, I was 17 years old, and people would say, "Well, what do you want to do?" Like, what the hell do I know? I'm 17 years old. Maybe play sports. I don't know. So someone said, "Well, you kind of like math and chemistry. Why don't you be a chemical engineer?" Okay. Do they make a lot of money? Yeah, pretty good. Okay. Um, but if you think about the following the clues that I followed from one job to another, and as I said, I got education in different areas as I learned what I wanted to do. I just followed those clues, and here I am today. And when at 17, if I can't imagine I would have said, well, what I'd like to do is start as a chemical engineer, then get into more business, then run a company. Then I'd like to be an executive coach to finish up my career. I mean, who the hell is going to say or see anything like that? So to sit there and say, what do I want to do when you're 17 years old or even later on in life, um, it's part of the mystery of life. And it's our job to follow the adventure, the discovery, and follow the clues and see where it takes you. And not, in fact, a lot of people will ask me when I'm coaching them, there's this box on the organization chart. I'd like to be there. And I caution them a little bit because, yeah, that's kind of a nice goal, but what is it you really want to do? What has everything that you've done so far, what's that led you to do? Who's that led you to be? Where will you thrive? Maybe there's not even a box on the chart that is where you need. So you really need to explore and think of life as that mystery that you're unfolding, and not think about things like retirement and just what are you passionate about. So yeah, follow those clues. I'm getting maybe a little philosophical here, but yeah, I think that's
no,
really important to
no,
us.
no. I have, like I always said, I wanted to write a book. I checked that off. Then, podcast became a thing, and now I check that off. Have a class that have put together, especially for young people in my industry who are not financially, I mean, they just aren't aware of what they know and what they don't know. So they don't make the best decisions with their lives. And there was no class in high school that said, here's your money. This is where you need to break it down and how you're going to live and how you're going to plan. So that is my next thing. But then I'm like, now what? I want to do something else. So I'm sure as time goes on, I'll get there and I'll figure it out.
You'll discover it and keep that part of the fun of life, the mystery of life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
So,
one of the things
uh,
too that I love to do, one of the things I love to do with my clients is help them find their superpower. This is really fun to me. We think that superpowers are just in the movies. They're not. Trust me. We all have one if we are smart enough to figure out what it is. It's kind of like, I don't know, if you think about some of the cartoons like The Incredibles, every family member had some unique powers.
yeah.
Or what was the popular one? Frozen.
Oh, yeah.
What was her name? Elsa. She
Elsa.
had magical powers with the ice and all that stuff. But even Spider-Man, I think about Spider-Man. One day he realized, hey, I got this clever thing I can hang from buildings and stuff. But it became a superpower when he could apply it to a mission or a vision. He started using it to solve crimes and help people for the greater good. Well, we can do the same thing. You have a superpower. You may not
Bossing
have
people around.
articulated it. What's that?
I said, what? Bossing people around?
Yeah, absolutely. That is one. No, I would say one of your superpowers is resilience. You may have a lot of them, but one is resilience. You know, resilience is about bouncing back from setbacks. um, Resilience is about the ability to keep going when others will quit.
Yeah, that's true.
It's about bouncing back, keeping moving, adapting, and winning the race in the long run. You can Resilience is something that can turn what others would see as a failure into just fuel to do better. Just being optimistic, getting better with every challenge. It keeps your vision alive, your purpose alive. If you think about your business, how you started the business, have you had anything go wrong at all along the way, or has it just been a smooth, like
Oh
sliding
no,
down the
I've had,
chute?
let's see, how many things can possibly go wrong? I probably had them all happen, all of them. Floods, walkouts. Oh God, it's tough. Lots.
So, if you think about the percent of population that would have that resilience to get through all those things and end up where you are with a successful business, and even you are turning that into a superpower like Spider-Man because you're turning that to the greater good. Some of the things you're doing right now, sharing things with people, some of the way your mission, your personal mission, is taking a new course. That's a superpower. I mean, I don't know if don't try hanging from a building. You know, it's 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 definitely a superpower, just like the Spider-Man or whatever else. That part of our chore in life is to figure out what our superpower is.
I like that. What is your superpower?
One of the superpowers I'm trying to develop sounds a little ambitious for me, but just on behalf of my clients, just curiosity and listening to people. And I love it when people say, "Gee, Wayne, I didn't realize I was even saying that." I was working with a client yesterday. He was he's a high-level executive in a company, um, and he was having trouble with one of his managers who wasn't developing their people in the right way. And his manager is a really nice person, and yet he's kind of failing in that way. So I was challenging my client. What's going on for you? If your manager isn't doing the job, what is it that he needs from you? And he was thinking, yeah, I've got to have a difficult conversation, and maybe I need to get a little tougher. And he was using words like that. So I said, now let me just challenge you. You're using words like difficult and challenge and difficult challenge and tougher. Doesn't sound like you have the mindset where this is an easy thing for you to do. And there was a long pause. He says, Wayne, I didn't even realize I was saying that. He said, yeah, as I think about I see this as a huge challenge, a huge barrier for me. So we talked about that. By the time we were done, he was using words like, I got to just tell him the truth. And, the kindest thing I can do is make sure he understands. Maybe I could ask him some questions about how he could do it better. So I was real proud of myself because I think I was tiptoeing into that area of just being curious about what I hear and listening and then feeding it back and helping him to shift his mindset and maybe take on new behaviors on behalf of this poor manager who probably wasn't sure he was doing a bad job. My client was even talking about moving him to a different role. This poor manager really hadn't heard the truth yet. So that's an example of how we can all maybe develop some superpowers. Now, I'm not going to hang from a building either, Gary, but I mean, those are the things that really are meaningful to me. Something special about ourselves that we can translate into accomplishing a vision or something for the greater purpose, the greater good.
I like that. That's very cool. Now, can you disclose any of your, like some of your clients or any of them? I mean, you talk about companies and individuals. I know your consulting clients are pretty much all over the United States and world. I've heard you talk about people out of the country as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I can mention some of the clients. I won't connect names with clients, but I can also then mention a few specific clients I've worked with. But um, some of the companies I've had a chance to work with, some big companies, some nonprofits, even a few startups, even a few family businesses. But some of the companies I work with are, for example, Fidelity, um, some of the aerospace people like Raytheon, and you might know the company Moog in East Aurora. They make helicopters and things and airplane parts for, military, whatever. Um, I've worked with banks, Bank of Montreal, Bank of Tampa, even the Caribbean Development Bank. Um, I work with nuclear power plants, work with some of them in the state of Washington, one in Arkansas, one in New Hampshire. I work with pharmaceutical firms, Boehringer Ingelheim, Johnson and Johnson, people like that. I work with a group of Florida school superintendents. Work with Florida with some automobile manufacturers. I work with Chrysler, Ford, and Toyota. Work with Lowe's and Home Depot. I work with the Norfolk Southern Railroad. I even work with the U.S. Army. They're trying to learn more about accountability. There's a lot of command and control, but they realize that gets you uh, people will comply, but they're looking for more commitment and trying to learn new ways of achieving accountability. So that's really, but the point is, I work with all industries. The common factor, though, is leadership. Every one of them, leaders I work with, are trying to learn more about how to influence people, how to show up as a leader, how to build trust, um, how to create a vision, how to coach their people and improve performance, how to build a great culture where people can be successful. So those are all common elements, and the fun part of it is I get to talk to people in all these businesses, and really keeps it fun. Every day, I never know where my journey's gonna take it.
That's pretty cool. Congratulations. I'm pretty proud of that. Say that my dad worked with all these people in all these companies. That's very cool.
It really is fun, yeah.
So, from the beginning of when you started your professional career to now, what do you think your favorite thing slash position was or is?
I have a lot of fun ones, but I'd say my favorite is what I'm doing right now, the coaching. I think it's me at my best, as everything I've done comes together, and I feel like I'm really helping people. When my day is over, I don't feel tired. I feel energized, and I say that's a really good measure for everybody. If you come home from work and you're really energized, you're in the right culture. If you come home from work and you're just about making it through the door, now don't have any energy left for the kids or for family or what you want to do, think about whether your passion is aligned with the culture and the role. A lot of people think about life balance in terms of hours. How many hours I spend at work and home. It's really about energy. Do you drain the tank of energy when you're at work, or do you come home full of energy? I even have some of my clients printing out their weekly calendar and having them color in each item on the calendar, red or green. The red means, boy, that was draining. That meeting was horrible. The green is, man, when I came out of that session, I felt great. And it's amazing how much red is on these calendars, and people are really looking at that, saying, boy, I've got to change what I'm doing. So I really am energized now. The other thing too is when I'm done at the end of the day, my clients all take away the problems. I don't. It's not like when I was back in the middle of everything in the corporate world. You never. It's 24/7, 365. That's what I love about this too.
Yeah, that is true. That is nice. Do your I'm sure they are, but do your clients really value and appreciate what you bring to the table for them with their careers?
I think they do, and I get a lot of feedback that they do. Some of the notes I've gotten. One I got, uh, this individual said I changed their life. I mean, gee, that's how many times you get to hear that. Or I'll hear people say, Wayne, I just figured that out. That's been bothering me since high school or something, and you say, wow, all I did was listen and feedback, help you with a few skills, um, maybe helped you with some skills around handling a conflict you have or how to build that team or whatever. And so it seems kind of straightforward to me. Sometimes can really help someone turn the light bulb on for themselves, and they really do appreciate that. The thing I like most to work with people is emotional intelligence, um, I don't know how many people really think about emotional intelligence. That's the ability to manage our emotions, to really understand, recognize, understand our emotions, and more than our emotions, do we know what all our strengths are and our weaknesses? What kind of belief system do we have, and where'd that come from? What experiences have we had? What's our personality type? That's kind of like what's under the iceberg that percolates up into our behaviors. And do we know what those are so that we can manage those behaviors? That's emotional intelligence. Um, I've had some really fun times and rewarding times with that. Um, Even yesterday, I was working with a guy, Bill, who is an executive who just got promoted, and now he runs a part of an aerospace company. He's reporting to the board, and he hasn't done this before. And he notices that when he goes into meetings, like with the board, they'll ask him a question. Well, he'll launch into a 10-minute description of all the details, and he gets feedback that, we didn't even realize what you were saying, and we're not sure what the answer was. You've got to figure out something to do there. So he couldn't figure out what was going on there. So we kind of delved under the iceberg and what's a driver that's causing that? Well, we did a personality assessment, and one of his strengths is what's called diligence, very diligent. So you give him something to do, he's going to go into all the details, going to really understand it. You're going to come out with the right answers and figure things out and solve problems. But what happens is that strength, when the board says, what about this? He's going to be very diligent in his answer. He's going to give you 15 minutes on every detail that he knows, which is inappropriate. So now that he knows about diligence, he's in a board meeting, they ask him a question, and that clicks in for him. And he said, wait a minute, Bill, remember, you got this diligence thing going on, and we've we've gone through a couple of items that he's going to remind himself of. Like, for example, Bill, answer this in one sentence. Bill, take a deep breath before you answer. There's a few things on his mental checklist he goes through. So now he's very crisp. They answer a question, he tells them what they want to know, and he walks away as the executive he wants to be. So that's the emotional intelligence. Really, it's not just the skill of communicating, but it's understanding what's going on for you, kind of the deeper things that are going on for you, and moving that from this vague thing that's causing me problems to get it up to that cognitive level of, oh, I understand this. Let me translate this in a way that I'm going to be successful. So that's what I love to do. I had a heartwarming one not long ago. Um, One of my clients was she couldn't figure out how to delegate more to people. That was what we started with. I struggle delegating with people. I seem to want to do the detail myself, but everyone's telling me I need to delegate more. I'm not using my people. So I said, I asked a lot of questions and listening. And what I was hearing is she's really into control. I mean, a lot of us have this thing. We really need to control things. And when I gave her the examples and fed that back to her, all of a sudden there was a long silence. And I said, Mary, are you there? What's going on? She says, Wayne, I just realized, she says, I have a 13-year-old daughter. We've always had a great relationship because I have to say the last 6 months have been horrible. We're farther apart. We're always arguing. She won't listen to me. She says, you know what? I realize it's about my control. I'm trying to control her. She's 13 years old. She needs to make some decisions. And and she was almost in tears. She says, I just realized that there's this thing I have about control. Well, it turns out that that was what's happening with delegation too. She wanted to give the project to somebody, but she had to control. So now, having built that emotional intelligence around control, it was always going to be there. But in those moments when she needed to ask someone to delegate, she could say, "Oh, wait a minute, Mary, remember the control thing that's going to stop you. Let it go, and we'd have a few mental checklist things she would do. And even with her daughter, her next call, she says, Wayne, I had a long talk with my daughter. We're really getting it back together. And I admitted to her that I'm trying to control her. I won't do that anymore. We talked about examples. Anyway, I'm kind of rambling about this, but those are the most rewarding things to help people go a little deeper and learn a little bit more about themselves. Now they've got that tucked away forever, and they can, use that to be more successful.
I
So
love those
emotional
stories.
intelligence is one of the things I love to work on with people.
And most people don't even know what it is or it even existed.
God, no. All you have to do is watch YouTube. I mean, I love to watch. I love to watch these traffic stops on YouTube. At the very basic primal instincts of ourselves, we have this fight or flight. And you see that, you'll either see people stopped by the police and all of a sudden they take off, that's the flight, or they'll start arguing that they don't need a license, or you stop because there wasn't, they go into fight. None of those things work out well for them.
No.
Emotional intelligence would raise that to the level of understanding that, okay, I may have done something wrong. It's legally, I need to provide my license. I'll do that. Say, yes, sir. It may not still be a great outcome, but it's going to be better than any of the alternatives. So I love watching that on YouTube just to see, you're right. Most people walking around have pretty low emotional intelligence.
Not that I've ever gotten a speeding ticket, of course. I would not
No,
know a
none of us
ticket.
have. No,
Yeah, no.
of course not. At
I'll
least
have,
nothing you'd ever tell your father about, right?
yeah, no, no. All the stories that we've told you in these years, when they're like 20 years past when they happen, you're like, I didn't know that. And you're like, yeah, I knew that. What do you think I was, an idiot? Because we were growing up. Anyways, if you could give advice to people really young in their beginning of their career, what would it be?
Well, if you're just starting out, here's one thing I would say is focus less on all these things about climbing the ladder and what box on the chart you want to achieve. The first priority is just learn. Be curious. Show up every day learning something new, asking more questions, building relationships, building trust, some of the basics, and realize you're on a journey. Um, we think that we were going to take some courses or get a certificate or get a degree, and there I am. I'm in my career. That's the beginning of a fun, wonderful journey. Um, and take the time to learn about you. Who are you? What matters to you? What do you love to do? Just think of your career as that treasure hunt I mentioned. You're just following the clues. You don't know where it's going to take you. If you're 17 or something and graduating from high school, you don't know where it's going to take you. But be surprised, be curious, see where it takes you. Make it an adventure and be intentional about it. Learn and discover and ask yourself, what's this teaching me? What have I learned?
I love
Even
that.
start thinking about your superpower too. What do I notice? What are people asking me about? What do I think to be good at? What's my brand? We call it brand sometimes. What's my uniqueness? And how do I develop that? One of the things that a lot of my clients, we do a 360 assessment of their behaviors, and they always want to know, what am I doing wrong? I always challenge them on that and say, don't you want to know what you're doing right? It's like an athlete. If I don't know, a baseball player who can throw a baseball at 100 miles an hour, do you want to learn a different sport because you're not good at it, or do you want to take that superpower, the 100 miles an hour, and perfect it, know how to throw it differently or whatever, so you can strike out batters? And that's maybe what you love to do. That's what you're meant to do. That's your superpower.
I
So
like
yeah,
that.
that's one thing I would say. Just pay attention to who you are and grow. Learn from others. Be curious. Ask questions. Find out who you are.
I think that's great advice, especially some people there go into their careers and immediately want to climb the ladder or make a ton of money, however they have to get there. And they kind of miss
Exactly.
the whole journey part.
They do. They bypass the whole important part of the journey,
Yeah.
who they are.
Yeah.
In fact, a lot of times people write a resume and say, "What do you think of this, Wayne?" Well, it's a list of what they did. It's nothing about who they are. And and we don't even think that way. Sometimes I'll do team sessions and I'll start by saying, I'd like to go around the room and have each of you tell me who you are. Well, guess what they do? They tell me what they do. I'm the director of blah, blah, blah. And then when they're done, I say, that's good, but now let's go back and answer the first question, which is who you are. Well, I get a blank stare because most people don't know who they are. They don't know what's special about them, what their strengths are, what their uniqueness is, what they bring to a team, what their learnings have been, and that's something we're not trained to do. It's all about the hierarchy on the organizational chart or the pay scale or things like that.
Yeah. That is true. And I truly believe if people kind of were more intentional about what they want to do, they would really enjoy their lives and live a much more fulfilled life.
You're absolutely right. I talking about retirement. I had a client, it's about 2 years or so ago now, called me up and said, Wayne, I'm close to retirement. I'd like to have some coaching on where I go from here. And we were talking, and I said, well, tell me how you got to where you are today. And there was this long pause. He said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, tell me the steps you took and, how you managed your career up to this point. Another long pause. He says, that's a good question. He says, I just came into work, and one day they told me I'd have to go to this office and do that job. Then I was over here. But what he was describing was a very unintentional path that he took. Wasn't sure what he really liked to do. He was just kind of looking forward to that retirement date. And it was so depressing to me to hear him tell that story. He really he didn't take any real initiative or interest in his own career. He just kind of did what he said every day, put one foot in front of the other. Here he was, ready to retire. Not sure how he got there. So, we did work on that, and he's got some exciting things going now, post retirement. But it was so sad to hear that story, and I hope that I would suggest to no one to take that path. To make sure you're on the journey and learning where you want to go, and not just kind of following a path. Um,
I agree. I always say you got one shot in life. Make it big, make it good.
you got it.
Well, Dad, thanks so much for being on this podcast today with me and talking and letting me interview you. But thank you very much for doing this with me today. And I hope a lot of people get to hear this because I think you had a lot of amazing, great things to say. So thank you.
You bet. My pleasure, Carrie. Loved it. Take care.
Love you. Talk to you later.